You ever look at pigeons in the city and think, why are they everywhere? Turns out, some people reckon they ain't just birds. There's this wild theory about secret government experiments from back in the 70s. Scientists supposedly figured out how to implant tiny chips into living animals' brains. Not to make them smarter or whatever, but to control their movements. Pigeons and rats were apparently perfect test subjects. They're small, blend in, and can go anywhere. These experiments weren't done in plain sight, obviously. Rumor has it, underground labs in London and New York were the testing grounds. The tech wasn't like today's smartphones, but it was advanced enough to steer these creatures remotely. A whistleblower in the 90s claimed to have worked on a project called BioSpy. According to him, pigeons were fitted with neural implants connected to a wireless signal. Think of it like a remote-controlled drone, but alive. The scary part? They weren't just using pigeons for surveillance. Rats, with their knack for squeezing into tight spaces, were also wired up. Some of these rats were reportedly sent into rival embassies during the Cold War. You ever notice how pigeons always seem to hang around government buildings? That ain't a coincidence, some say. The implants allowed handlers to direct the birds where they needed eyes or ears. In 2013, a video surfaced online showing a pigeon with what looked like a small device attached under its wing. Officials called it fake, but animal experts pointed out it could have been a microchip. If it was fake, why was it taken down so fast? And rats? They've been used for years in military and science experiments. In one declassified project, rats were trained to sniff out bombs. But some documents hinted that certain rats weren't just trained, they were controlled. The chip tech works by stimulating parts of the brain responsible for movement. A handler could press a button, and the animal would turn left or right. Creepy, yeah? But it's supposedly undetectable to anyone watching. Here's where it gets mental: if pigeons or rats were caught or destroyed, there's no evidence left behind. The chips dissolve into organic material after a certain time. No proof, no trail. Someone might say, why not use drones instead? But here's the thing, drones need charging, they're noisy, and people notice them. Pigeons and rats? No one bats an eye at those. If you've ever walked past a rat in the street and thought it stared at you funny, maybe it wasn't random. Some rats were even said to be equipped with tiny cameras. It's like a real-life spy movie. In 2004, a university study accidentally stumbled upon neural implants in a pigeon. The researchers weren't allowed to publish their findings. Apparently, a private investor stepped in to fund further research and keep things quiet. Now, here's where it gets darker. What if the tech has advanced even more? They could be tracking people's movements in real time. Imagine being followed by a pigeon, and you'd never know. Why pigeons, though? They're everywhere, they don't raise suspicion, and they can land just about anywhere. Parks, windowsills, busy streets, you name it. Drop a comment right now. Do you think it's possible, or are we all just paranoid? If this is true, it makes you wonder what else they're hiding. Some ex-military folks claim they saw early prototypes of these chips in action. One guy said he watched a pigeon fly in perfect circles on command during a test in the 80s. Sounds crazy, right? But let's not forget, governments have funded stranger things. Remember MKUltra? Mind control experiments aren't exactly a conspiracy anymore, they've been proven real. In 2011, a tech startup claimed to have developed neural chips for animals, supposedly for medical purposes. But the patents they filed were eerily similar to descriptions from the 70s experiments. The startup shut down a year later without any explanation. Some reckon they were bought out by a government agency. Others think they were forced to stop talking. Rats with cameras, pigeons with mics. It's starting to feel like sci-fi, but the tech exists. And if it exists, you know someone's using it. Think about the surveillance possibilities. A pigeon sitting on your window could be recording everything. Your conversations, your screen, all of it. Why do you think pigeons are so fearless? They don't scatter like other birds. It's almost like they've been programmed to stay close to people. And rats? They're everywhere in cities, from subways to alleyways. They could be mapping out areas humans can't reach. Imagine the data that could gather. This ain't just about spying on criminals or enemies. What if regular people are being monitored? Governments always say it's for security, but where's the line? If you're thinking this is all too far-fetched, let me remind you, drones and facial recognition were sci-fi once. Now they're normal. Neural implants in animals could be the next step in covert surveillance. It's cheap, effective, and untraceable. What more would they want? There's even been talk about using this tech in wildlife conservation. But who's to say the line hasn't already been crossed? Imagine the data they'd get from controlling entire flocks of birds. Crowd movements, protest routes it'd all be easy to monitor. And what about remote access? If they can steer an animal, they could probably make it act unpredictably too. Like causing panic in crowded areas. In 2016, leaked documents mentioned biosurveillance projects. The details were vague, but pigeons and rats were specifically named. Suspicious? No. Those documents also hinted at overseas use, particularly in conflict zones. They called it non-human intelligence gathering. Ever wonder why pigeons are so common in war zones? Sure, they're natural survivors, but maybe there's more to it. Let's not forget, rats and pigeons were historically used in war efforts. From delivering messages to sniffing out explosives, they've always been tools, but now, with neural tech, they're not just tools, they're weapons. And weapons don't always stay on one side of the fight. If governments are doing this, private companies could be too. Imagine corporations using pigeons to gather data on competitors. It's not just pigeons and rats, either. Any animal could theoretically be chipped and controlled. Cats, dogs, even insects. Insects? Yep, there is actual research into controlling beetles and dragonflies. They're harder to spot than birds or mammals. If insects can be controlled, that raises a whole new level of creepy. Imagine being followed by a dragonfly with a camera. This tech blurs the line between biology and machines. It's no longer sci-fi, it's reality. And we're living in it. If you're still not convinced, think about this: we already chip pets for identification. What's stopping them from taking it a step further? In 2019, a tech firm showcased a rat with a brain implant navigating a maze via remote control. They said it was for scientific purposes, but who decides what that means? The potential for abuse is massive. And the scariest part? You wouldn't even know it's happening. Right now, there could be animals watching you, recording you, tracking you. It sounds mad, but is it really? If governments were doing this, would they admit it? Of course not. They'd call it a conspiracy and bury the truth. The more you think about it, the less crazy it seems. Neural tech in animals isn't a question of if, but when. And when it's used, it's not just criminals who'll be targeted. Everyone is a potential subject. If you've ever seen a pigeon staring at you too long, maybe it wasn't just your imagination. Maybe it was watching. So, what do you think? Is this possible, or are we all just paranoid? Let me know in the comments. And before you go, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, there is a lot more they don't want you to know.